Today's video is going to be a review of the 2009 Vespa S150. We'll be covering all the things I liked about the bike, the things I disliked about the bike, why I'm selling it, what I got to replace it, but more importantly, whether or not you should buy one. Overall, I think this is a great scooter, but not without a couple flaws, which we'll get into in due course. First, let me introduce you to my Vespa. It's a 150cc, single-cylinder, air-cooled Vespa. It still uses a carburetor, but in some markets beginning around 2010, 2011, it'll actually go to a fuel-injected motor. For brakes, we have a single caliper, single piston brake up front and a drum brake in the rear. The Vespa S150 is basically the exact same scooter as the LX150, but there's just a few styling differences. Also, I just want to say, sorry, this is going to be a very rushed video with police sirens going off and my dog kicking through leaves. I listed the thing 2 nights ago. I had a buyer for it the next day. I promised him I would deliver it today. I've had to work in between, so we're going to do this super quick. Sorry if it's kind of rushed. Yeah. You have a ton of storage available to you with storage space underneath the seat, and if you have a top case there as well. We'll get more into storage when I talk about the pros and cons, because obviously that is a pro of this bike. Most of the Vespa body is metal, and that's why, you know, a Vespa will typically cost a little bit more than your average Honda or Yamaha Japanese motorcycle, but yeah, it's just a little bit more class. The downside is that if you do scratch it, you would end up having to not just replace a panel, but kind of like repaint this whole area. So most people will just try and touch it up a bit and then add a little sticker to cover the bulk of the damage. All right, enough with the introductions. Let's just get to the pros and cons of this bike already. A lot of what I like about the Vespa S150 comes down to its small body size. First, the bike only weighs 250 pounds, meaning it's easy for me to throw around either here in my garage or out on the street. I'm used to bikes that weigh like 400 pounds, 500 pounds, sometimes more than I do. So for me to have a bike that only weighs like 70 pounds more than me, it's awesome. The small width of the Vespa means it can just fit through anything. So whether I'm trying to fit it, you know, between my car and the house to get down the driveway, or just in between cars and traffic, it just fits. That's definitely an advantage of this bike. Another advantage of actually either Vespa, the 150 or this 250 we'll talk about later, is sometimes you get special treatment. In my city you do. Scooters are allowed to park on the sidewalks provided they're not impeding the way of traffic. Here's my pup. Hi. We do still get free motorcycle parking, but being able to just literally pull up right outside the building, it's so helpful. And if you're already running late, not having to search for a parking spot, just zipping right by your office front door, amazing. Another advantage is it's so great for running errands because, again, you have all of that space underneath the seat. And this is actually great for food because your motor's right underneath here. So it does kind of heat up. And if you have a top case, you also have room right there for a helmet. Another advantage, it is so great to run errands on this bike. A, because you can fit through traffic where other cars and even other motorcycles wouldn't, and even other Vespas wouldn't fit. And just being able to just run down, pick up stuff, like I said. You have the top case too for picking up more stuff. If I'm going to choose between ordering something on Uber Eats on takeout day, which is a very frequent day at my house, or, you know, going down and picking up myself, I can save myself the $10 of Uber Eats fees and just jump on my Vespa, burn like 2 pennies worth of gas. We'll talk about fuel economy later, and it's such a treat to take this thing. So speaking of zipping around and money, let's talk about performance, fuel economy, and just overall costs, that kind of thing. So this little Vespa S150 makes about 11.7 horsepower. Adorable, I know. But it'll do about 100 kilometers an hour or about 62 miles per hour, which honestly I think is pretty good. It'll do that speed even with a passenger on the back seat. We have a big roadway about 10 minutes from the house, and the speed limit is 80 kilometers an hour, about 50 miles per hour. Everyone obviously goes faster than that, and this little Vespa has no issues keeping up with that speed, even with a passenger on the back, and going a little bit faster than some cars too. If you look underneath the seat, you will find that the Vespa S150, at least for the 2009, still uses a carburetor. We'll talk more about that later. But one thing it does have is a bit of an auto choke function. That actually makes life super easy. You don't have to fiddle around with a choke. There's nothing to mess with on the handles. If you want to cold start it even in the middle of the winter to go for a little ride, you can hit the starter. It'll automatically idle a little bit faster and warm up by itself as it needs to. Just a quick little fun tip before we get into the cons of the S150. If you were to buy a Vespa S50, the two bikes are basically identical. The only thing is the motor on the inside, some of the components are a little different. So in theory, you could buy a Vespa S50 and maybe you had an extra S150 motor lying around, you could just swap the two. And why would you want to do this? Well, in a lot of parts of the world, there are certain advantages to having a 50cc motorcycle. These can include cheaper insurance. In some places, you don't even need a motorcycle license. If you have a car license, that's good enough. And, well, in some places, you can even ride 50cc's as a 14-year-old. So if you do that, not that I want to recommend you do anything illegal, figure out where your local laws are, but just make sure you keep the badge afterwards. So here's where you gas up on the bike, and for fuel economy, it does about 4 liters per 100 kilometers, or about 58 miles per gallon. Newer Vespa S150s with fuel injection instead of carburetors are going to get closer to 3 liters per 100 kilometers, or about 78 miles per gallon. That's a pretty big improvement, but it's not the only improvement, and that's going to bring us closer to things I don't like about the S150. Before that, though, I just want to touch on this. The seat here on the S150 is a little bit differently shaped than the LX150. It kind of slopes back down here. Honestly, my passenger really likes this. It kind of cups her really nicely between here and the backrest. I find the seat just great, whether I'm 2 up or 1 up. I like it a lot. I would say, yeah, great seat, very comfortable ride. Comfortable sitting at your kitchen table ergonomics, 90 degrees bend at the hips, 90 degrees bend at the knees. You could ride this thing for hours. I think you'd be fine on it. And I say that as a guy who has custom seat. I'm picky about my seats, and I like the stock seat on this bike. All right, let's talk about the things I dislike about the Vespa S150, and let's start with what separates the S150 from the LX150, which is this rectangular headlight. I get that the headlight is a throwback to a bygone era of Vespa lore, but it's not for me. I like circular, round headlights. Hence, this bike. The next thing I don't like is this weird, useless storage space in the front. Now, on most Vespas, you get this closed-in area where you can fit maybe some sunglasses, some gloves, something like that. But on the S150, you get this open area where nothing fits and nothing stays, and there's no way of keeping anything. It's so small, you can't fit a pop can in here. And anything lighter than that, when you're going over bumps, you're just going to bounce right out. I really don't like this. Speaking of bounces, that leads us to suspension. I have a aftermarket shock on here. It's doing the job fairly well. Honestly, I was totally accepting of the fact that the suspension was decent until I tried the suspension on the Vespa GTS. Considering this is all about being small and nimble, I didn't care that it was a bumpy ride because I was just passing so many cars that the suspension didn't really bother me. Now, originally from factory, the Vespa had these little hang-down LED turn signals. I got rid of those. The original pieces, they actually had to drill holes through to get these in there so it would meet government requirements for how far away from each other your turn signals had to be. Yeah, I didn't like them. I got rid of them. I just think this looks so much more sleek. Another thing we should talk about is that this bike uses a CVT transmission, which means you don't have to shift gears. It's kind of automatic-ish. So you just twist to go. That's about it. Just like the same thing as in your car. A lot of cars now have CVT transmissions. It has its pros and cons. It's kind of a mixed bag. Like, you can put whatever roller weights you want, and that's going to affect how quickly the belts and everything start spinning. It's going to affect your acceleration, your top speeds. You can kind of play with it a little bit, which is nice. The flip side to that is you can't see the belt like you can on a motorcycle. So that belt can, at times, if you neglect it, just break on you and you don't have time to see it wearing away. So typically what a lot of people recommend is every time you're changing the tires out, that's probably a good time to inspect and probably just proactively replace the belt. I don't like that I have a part that is so essential to my vehicle that can just fail, that I can't see it happening ahead of time. So I'm going to put that as a con. It's not the biggest deal in the world if you're on top of your maintenance, but if you're going to just neglect the thing, you might be left stranded on a long enough timeline. That's all. You want to know what was much more disappointing? Is the Vespa factory top case. While the factory top cases are great because they're usually perfectly color matched to your bike, the quality of the hinges are so bad, and everybody complains about this. Does that seem solid to you? No, it doesn't seem solid at all. I expect a lot more quality from something that has a Vespa logo on it. I have had in the past GB top cases. I've had BMW top cases for various different BMW models and other GB stuff. I've never had such a bad top case. And That one on the GTS is a little better, but it has its own problems, which we'll cover in a different video. Yeah, lame top cases. Boo. Another annoyance is that by virtue of being so small, sometimes the little Vespa doesn't get all the respect it deserves, so car drivers might be tailgating you a little bit too much, and then that's why it's nice to just be able to squeeze through and filter your way forward. Or one time I found a millennial girl just on my bike taking pictures of herself because narcissism knows no limits in 2022. Yep. Next up we got brakes, which if you're riding solo, they are enough. But if you're riding two up at anything over 60 kilometers an hour, which I think is about 35 miles an hour, and you try and do a really hard, fast brake with a passenger on the back, it's rough, I'm not gonna lie. You wish you had a lot less stopping distance than what it needs to slow this thing down. If you already have one of these things and you're like, wow, this is not so great, the first thing I would do, bleed your front brakes. I have videos showing you guys how to do it. And you can possibly, if you really want to invest in it, switch to a steel braided brake lines, because this brake hose is probably original from 13 years ago. So it's probably expanded a bit. I'm sure if you got a new brake hose, bled your brakes, you'd gain a little bit more stopping power. But if you're planning on doing a lot of high speed two up, it's something to be mindful of. You're gonna need a lot of space to slow this baby down. The last thing I dislike about my Vespa S150 is the carburetor's performance. I think it really hinders this bike. I've taken other 150s out that were injected, and they just were so much more consistent in their performance. You know, sometimes from a red light, I just go full throttle. It'll just take off like a little tiny bullet, and that's great. And other times I just, red light, I pin it wide open throttle. And I don't know if it's the carb or the CVT, it's just kind of slow and sluggish to pick up. There's this initial hesitation, and you can try and mess around with the jets to try and get it right. Personally, I liked how the thing was jetted the rest of the time, so I just left it alone and dealt with it. But I know if I had a if I had a fuel injected S150, that wouldn't be a problem, and that's why I'm just sharing this info with you guys. Now, I've read some people say in forums that the Vespa S150 is just too small for a couple. I don't think so at all. I've been really happy two-up riding on this. I will say that me and my passenger combined are only about 300, maybe 310 tops. Yeah, if you guys are some bigger people, you might have different experience, but for us, this has been fine. So I would not put that as a con. For me, even two-up, the size was fine. I just wish we had a little bit more braking power. So let's talk about the mods and the maintenance that I've done. We already touched on the brakes a little bit, but there's plenty more. So firstly, the headlight and the running light were switched to LED. This not only gave a very white visual as opposed to like a dirty yellowish incandescent light bulb glow, it made the bike so much brighter, so much easier to see, so much safer, so much better visibility. At the same time, I picked a bulb that was not too bright, that was going to just be annoying and blinding for oncoming traffic. I found one that was low power, but still significantly brighter than stock. I'm really happy with it. I have a video all about it, actually. I'll link to it in the comments section. You should check that out. Those were my first kind of mods. Then I also replaced the headlight surround front and back and the chrome trim, because when I bought it, they were all scratched up and beat up and stuff. And as far as maintenance, the speedo cable was replaced, though I gotta admit that may or may not have been user error when I was replacing these parts here. I'm not sure. Obviously I did the brake fluids as I mentioned, and the turn signal switch was replaced. It was still pretty clicky turning left. It wasn't so clicky turning right. It's been replaced, cheap part, easy fix. I also changed these turn signals so that they would run as both running lights and turn signals, so check this out. When I initiate the turn signal there, it is just a turn signal. The other one stays a running light. And then when I turn off my turn signals, it automatically goes back to running lights on both sides, and that works for both of them. I'm actually gonna have a video showing you guys how I did that, because Vespa Motorsport, Scooter West, Bro-Watch channel, they have a kit you can buy, and it's pretty expensive, and I just found some random Amazon thing and made that work. I'll post up a video probably another couple weeks showing you guys how I did it. Hit subscribe if you want to see that. Back to the review. And the other mod I did was, see, that's your running light. I installed this little brake light in there, and I got a video for that too, that when I hit it, it makes the light flash a bunch of times, and then as long as you hold the lever, it stays on. So I'm gonna hit it again, just because it is a smaller vehicle, and I'm gonna end up putting that on all my bikes because when I'm slowing down, I want distracted drivers to see me, so having a brake light that goes, I'm stopping, hopefully is gonna stop me from getting rear-ended. All right, so obviously I've put a lot into my Vespa S150. I love it. So why am I selling it? And more importantly, would I buy another one? And most importantly to you, should you buy one? I'm selling it because even though I've done all this, it's still not the bike that I want it to be. Ideally, I want a Vespa with a round headlight, as vain as that sounds. I want fuel injection for just all-around predictable performance. And I want a bike that wasn't dropped a bunch of times by the previous owner, as this one is the case. So the question is, should you buy one? And I think if you're in the market for a Vespa that's reliable, simple, beginner-friendly, it's not going to break the bank because these are like 10 years old now, so they should be relatively cheap. And if they're not, don't buy it, wait for a cheap one. I would definitely suggest looking at either an LX150 or a Vespa S150. They are great motorcycles, well, great scooters. I have a handful of bikes. No, not all of these are mine, but you get the idea. Some of them are my customers. Honestly, the Vespa S is by far the most fun per cc, so yes, I do think you should get one. And you should also check out my other videos on modifying this one and maintaining it, so that way you'll be ready to do your own maintenance and make this bike even better than it comes from factory. So what did I get to replace it? Well, hey, technically the Vespa GTS you see in front of you right here is even older. It's a 2006, but it only has like 2,000 kilometers. I'll put on the screen what that is in miles, versus this one has 33,000 kilometers. So yeah, basically brand new, round headlight, fuel injected, no scratches. Totally what I was looking for, right? Should be super happy. I've only taken on one ride so far, I gotta be honest. I still prefer the S150. Hopefully I'm gonna get used to this. Subscribe if you wanna see if I end up, if this bike ends up growing on me or not, or if I end up just going back to the small frame Vespas. If you're wondering what a small frame is, this is a small frame, large frame, kind of a different platform. You see it with cars. I have a video doing a comparison of small frame versus large frame Vespas. So if you're shopping for a Vespa, you're not sure which one, you should check out that video too. Anyway, enough about the GTS. That's another video for another time. You hit subscribe if you want to see that. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of this Vespa right here, the S150. I really loved it. I think you will love it as well. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, please do me a favor, hit the thumbs up button. Helps YouTube push this video to more people, helps me grow my channel, which helps me make more content aimed at helping riders out. As always, thank you so much for watching. Ride safe, but have fun. Peace. Oh, one more thing. This is my pup. She's about 100 in dog years. We don't know how much longer she'll be with us. But she's a good girl and she likes bikes. So hit the thumbs up button for me, will you? Do it for her. She's adorable. All right, bye.